In this module, we're going to explore Woolf's novel To the Lighthouse, considered by many to be her masterwork. Many of you are going to be swept up in Woolf's writing. She is certainly at the top of her form, and I encourage you to let that happen, take delight in it, and also to think about what it is about the prose in this novel that is so beautiful and moving. Like many modernist works, To the Lighthouse has a structure that is meant to help readers navigate the complexities of an experimental text. It might be useful to take a step back from that term right now. All of Woolf's writing is highly experimental, but the fact that a novel like To the Lighthouse exists and has been read and studied by so many people means that its experiments are no longer novel to us. Still, the structure, labeled in the section headers as the window, time passes, and the lighthouse, helps to situate readers physically and temporally in the novel. As in Mrs. Dalloway, Woolf is contemplating time in this novel. You might remember from On Being Ill that one of Woolf's frustrations was that she had the idea for the novel while walking near her house in London. She said the idea for the novel came to her whole, but then immediately fell ill and was forbidden to work on the novel for quite some time. One could say that To the Lighthouse takes place on a single day, like Mrs. Dalloway, only with a 10-year gap in that day. The window starts in the afternoon and goes to bedtime. Then the 10-year gap happens. Then it picks up at midnight, back at the house, and goes through to the afternoon, a compact 24-hour period in which a war happens, major characters die, and the whole world changes. To the Lighthouse has many characters, partly because Woolf was the next youngest member of a large family with many friends and connections. To keep it straight, the Ramsay family has 8 children, just like the Stephens. The eldest children, Prue and Andrew, are young adults at the start of the novel, while the youngest, James and Cam, are 6 and 7 years old, respectively. Mr. Ramsay is a minor philosopher, much concerned with his status and legacy, and Mrs. Ramsay is a beautiful woman who takes on the task of mothering literally everyone she meets. As if 8 Ramsays are not enough, the house is also filled with an assortment of guests. Charles Tansley, a clever son of greengrocers who is Mr. Ramsay's student; Lily Briscoe, a family friend who comes to the Hebrides to paint; William Banks, an affable, unmarried, middle-aged gentleman who is also a guest at the house; Paul Rayleigh and Minta Doyle, young adults who become engaged while at the Ramsays' house; and Mr. Carmichael, a poet who thinks lofty thoughts and generally floats above it all. The setting is a summer house in the Hebrides, a series of islands off the coast of Scotland known for their beauty. The Hebrides are a popular holiday resort for Londoners wishing to escape the heat and humidity of London in summer. You can guess from Woolf's comments about her parents that the novel is loosely autobiographical. That is, the events are not particularly drawn from Woolf's life, but the feelings and relationships and characters are. The house in the Hebrides, which the family return to every summer, is based on Talland House, the house on the Cornish coast the Stephen family returned to each year until Julia Stephen's death. Leslie Stephen first rented the house in Cornwall from a railway company the same year Virginia was born, so all her summers from her first year of life until her mother died when she was 13 were spent in that ramshackle house and on the beaches and headlands of St. Ives. In writings from her childhood, we know that all the Stephen children loved their time at Talland House. By contrast, their home at 22 Hyde Park Gate was dark, gloomy, and restraining. The mother is obviously the most important figure in To the Lighthouse. Just as was true of Julia Stephen, Mrs. Ramsay has many children who need her, a demanding husband who is jealous of her attention to the children, and a continual house full of guests who need to be fed and looked after. You can imagine in such a scenario that getting alone time with the mother is very precious because it was so rare. For little Virginia Stephen, the second youngest in a large family, Getting her mother's attention was challenging, and, of course, the possibility of doing so at all ended when Julia Stevens died just as Virginia approached adolescence. Woolf herself understood that the loss of her mother when she was so young affected her deeply. She attributed her healing from this trauma to this book. Writing out the yearning and loss she felt helped her to process her grief so that her mother no longer obsessed her unhealthily. Woolf also had some issues to work out with respect to her father. In To the Lighthouse, we see Mr. Ramsay as in many ways an unattractive character, jealous of his wife's love for her children, anxiously worrying about whether he is enough of a genius to be remembered, demanding attention from everyone around him, but especially from women. Woolf draws his character pretty directly from her father, as she drew Mrs. Ramsay's directly from her mother. While he lived, he demanded that his wife, and then his daughters, devote themselves to his care, which meant burnishing his ego at all times. As you can see in this excerpt from Woolf's diary, writing to the lighthouse also helped her to work through some of the issues created by her father's demanding and selfish nature. For Woolf, as we saw in Mrs. Dalloway, thinking like a novelist, getting inside her characters' heads, allows her the distance and the insight to portray people empathetically. In the case of her father, she could think not just about how unpleasant he was to be around, but also about how charming he could be, and by doing that, come to grips with her complex feelings about him. It's useful to think about stream of consciousness writing when we read this book. Like Mrs. Dalloway, the book takes place in consciousness alone, although the physical world is present as well. In this book, Woolf uses focalization to move from one character's consciousness to the next. Stream of consciousness is always interior because it takes place in a character's mind. It can connect to the physical world outside, but also to things that happen inside a person, like thoughts that flow freely, associatively, and with structures like logic, less important than the internal connections we make between ideas or thoughts that may be very unlike one another. A minute ago, I mentioned focalization, a technique Woolf uses to move from one consciousness to another. Focalization is a term from narrative theory that provides a way to think about a third-person narrative where the narrative is channeled through a character's eyes. The character isn't necessarily the narrator or connected with the narrator, but the narrator reports things from the character's point of view. Another way to say this is that a particular character's viewpoint is privileged in the narration. Pretty much all narrative is focalized one way or another, but modernist texts make use of this technique to place readers wholly within the mind of the focalizing character. We don't just see things from the character's point of view, but we are blinded to things the character doesn't observe or care about. This can raise some questions for us. Many characters in the novel get their turn at being the eyes through which the narrative travels, but it is most often focalized through Lily Briscoe. What implications do you think this might have for the way we see the various characters? And how do you think this might affect our understanding of the plot events and characterizations in the novel? You could ask these same questions about other characters who take their turn as focalizers for the text. Make a list of them, and then ask yourself what effects these focalizations have on us as readers.